Hey Matt, this. I'm excited for this episode. It took a little while, but I was able to find some good pilots from TV, to fly us to new heights.
What do you mean fly us to new heights?
We're talking about pilot episodes. That means we're doing like episodes, and we're going to be flying.
No, pilots like as in launching the series, not like pilots like people who fly planes.
Well, that's a whole different list.
Then what were you doing?
Clearly, misunderstanding the mechanics of flight travel and podcasts.
Brian, every single episode we do, I just feel a little bit dumber for talking with you. I just want you to know that.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, welcome back to TV Guys, the show that has already had its successful pilot, and we're almost at 100 episodes, so we're about to hit syndication. I'm Matt,
I'm Brian.
and we are going to talk about our top pilot episodes. So those of you who are in the know, a lot of you guys know the term for the first episode of a TV show is called the pilot. So we're going to talk about what are the best series premieres that we have seen in all of TV history. And there are some that are just absolutely legendary. So we've got kind of our top three list. I have a couple extras too, because if we were going to do a top list like in order, my number 4 is like right next to my number 3. They're both so good.
I only have the three myself.
Okay.
It's interesting with
Look at
pilots
you.
because pilots are essentially just like an advertisement for the show. Like, hey, they make one episode. A lot of times it's they don't even have like the same set, same location, and it's them going to the network saying, "Hey, will you let us make this show?"
Yeah.
And most pilots don't get picked up. Here, like pilot season is a big thing where like they go and they make a bunch of pilots, and like a few of them get picked up, and then from then on, that's why they're all called pilot. It's their like pitch to the networks, and then once they get picked up and greenlit, then like, yeah, we're gonna make more of The Office. We're gonna make more of Parks and Rec.
Yeah, absolutely. There's plenty of times when they have that's all that is shot. I don't think that's the case so much anymore, especially with a lot of streaming content. Like Amazon's not gonna be like, let's do a pitch of the Lord of the Rings series and just do one
Mm.
whole episode. That's a really expensive pilot. But especially for like sitcoms, it wasn't too much to just throw together a pilot and see if this concept works. And so there are a lot of pilots that exist in the world that we've never even seen because it didn't even get that far.
Yeah, a lot of times there are like cast changes because I know in Full House they had a completely different Danny Tanner besides Bob Saget, and they replaced him.
Yep. New Girl is another one, although they brought back is it Damon
Damon
Wayans
Wayans,
Jr.?
yep, Damon Wayans Jr.
Yeah, they brought him back, which I think both of them are great. I'm really glad that we got Winston's character. But Coach is a solid addition, and he holds his own on that show too.
Yeah, but you think about that, it's promoting your show. It should always be a strong episode, but it's not. A lot of times, there are episodes in my list of like with TV shows I love that the pilot is weak and it's not the greatest. Like The Office and Parks and Rec, both of them. Neither of them are on my list for great pilots. They'd be on my list for great TV shows.
Yeah, and there's something with comedies too. Comedies have gotten better, I've noticed, but there was really a good period of time when the first season of comedies was usually bad. And the reason why is because the writers didn't really have the best feel for the characters yet. Because when you put an actor into that character, the actor also takes what's written on the page and puts their own spin on it. And then the writers, as the seasons progress, will play to that strength of the actor and what their interpretation of the script is. And so you see by season 2, season 3, they really have these characters figured out and the jokes flow a lot more naturally versus the first season.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
But I do have a comedy as my number 3. So I'll just use that as a segue because this was a show that had its characters like 95% of the way there, that they really had a solid understanding of these characters before anything happened. And it was just so cohesive right off the bat. And the show didn't last super long, although it got picked up again later. But the show was Arrested Development. And Arrested Development had just a killer pilot that we got everything that we needed to know about the family dynamic and the inciting incident of his father getting arrested.
Mm-hmm.
But it was like right away, it kind of started us in the future where it's like this is Michael, and he is going to be, this is the last day he's going to be with his family, and he knows he's going to leave and that sort of thing. And then like we get to the end of the episode and we realize Michael needs to stick around, and so we have the crux of it. But every character, like the way that they're introduced through it, and the different things that they have set up for them, like the whole idea of maybe being George Michael's cousin and also his crush, like that whole thing, and the way that they bring them together like is really funny and really ironic. The way that they introduce Job with his illusions and his tricks, and like even they have these callbacks that they'll have later on in seasons that they constantly are coming back to jokes made in the pilot episode.
Yeah. It's good, and I like that you brought up the fact of George Senior going to prison and the family getting shook up. That is like why we're picking up with this family, because a lot of times in pilots you have to think, why are we as the audience picking up with this group of people now? What's so special about right now? And for them, it was dealing with suddenly the whole family has shifted because the patriarch of the family is now in prison, and how does everyone deal with that? At the same time, you're introducing all these characters, as you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah, and they introduce them really well. I think Tobias's introduction is the best because they kind of are playing a little bit loose with the timeline in this, where they're jumping around. And so they'll do some flashbacks to show you how they got to this spot on the boat. And so Tobias somehow completely misses the boat, and they make jokes about this other boat where there's homosexuals, and I think they're protesting, but there's this homosexual boat off to the side of the big yacht that they're having this big business retirement dinner or party for George Senior. And so they're making jokes about, especially Michael's mom. Lucille is making these jokes about the gay people in the boat, like, look what the homosexuals have done, like all that sort of stuff. But they never show the boat until they have Tobias somehow has found himself on that boat. Yeah. And that also sets the precedent for his character for the rest of the seasons as well.
Yeah. Do they ever actually say that he's gay, or is it just like always ambiguously like we see it but he doesn't see it?
It's very heavily implied. I also like that there's that one, we've brought this up before, there's the one hidden joke that they were going to pay off but they never ended up paying off, where he was actually an albino black man.
Oh, that's right, I remember that.
The groundwork that they laid for that is insane. Again, with the Tobias thing, it's also funny because Lindsay, his wife, is on the boat and she sees the homosexual boat there. She's like, oh my gosh, I think I have that same blouse. Well, she does, because that's what Tobias is wearing, because he thinks it's a pirate party. And so he goes into her clothes as like, oh, this will work, and puts it on. So it's like this joke, even that joke is made at the very beginning where Lindsay says that early in the episode, and then it pays off again later in the episode where it's like, that actually is hers. And Arrested Development is really good at doing that with their jokes. And so we immediately have that right out the gate. Hilarious episode. I was hooked after the pilot. So
yeah, it also sets up, like you said, the dynamic of Michael always like, all right, I'm leaving, and then he always comes back, and then it comes to like the family saying Michael always comes back. It's his thing.
It really is. Like, well, you will never see me again. Like, all right. And they even like lampshade that later. It's like the third season. Like, all right, you're leaving. Sure. We all know you're coming back, because he does that. It's great. Yeah.
Arrested Development, you have to be okay with just the absurd off the wall humor and aggressive stupidity among like a lot of the cast. But if that's your cup of tea, then watch this show.
The other thing you have to be okay with too is no real character development of these characters. They go through a fake development sometimes, where it's like, oh, they're going to be maturing through this situation, but because it's Arrested Development, like that title itself just implies that all of these characters are stuck making the same self-destructive decisions, and no matter what they do, it's always going to keep them in the exact same status quo that they've always had.
There's also light incest. Like the cousins have a crush on each other.
It's like I may have committed some light treason. Light incest. There you go. So there's your trigger warnings, I guess. There's light incest.
Well, because later on we find out that they're not actually related, correct?
I can't even remember how that ends, because they do is like, yeah, she's not related.
It comes out that Lindsay is adopted.
Something like that.
Yeah.
But What a
Uh,
show. Like that pitch itself, if you've never seen the show, you're like, I don't think I want to watch it now after seeing that. No, it's really well written until Netflix gets their hands on it. And then
yeah.
even then the fourth season, which is the first
Mhm.
Netflix, it's not bad. It's just that they had to work around all these different schedules, and it tells.
Mhm.
You can see it, it shows.
Yeah. So my number three is a show that I don't believe has any incest. So,
Well, you hope not.
so incest free, and it is a comedy. Is a show we've talked about a lot on the show. It would be Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I think it has a fantastic first episode
Yeah.
because initially you're introduced to like this precinct without a leader, and how like they're still getting their work done, but it's kind of just a little bit chaos. And then introducing Captain Holt, who's a very straight laced, by the books, like you're gonna do things my way kind of guy into the mix, and seeing how he really tries to find everyone's strength and pull people together, and he still does throw his weight around, but he does it in a way that pulls the team together. And then that final scene when Jake has been pushing against him the whole time, and they're all at the storage unit, and then as like they're taking down the bad guy, Jake's like, "Oh, wait a minute! I realize why you wanted me to wear a tie. It's a uniform, and it's like we're all part of the team." And he's like, "Well, yeah. Can we arrest this guy first, and then we'll have our?"
Yeah.
And I love the scene where Terry is going through everybody. He's like, "Well, this is Rosa. This is Charles. This is Jake. This is Hitchcock and Scully." And like we as the audience are like kind of getting the download as to who these guys are, along with Captain Holt. It's a smart way to do it.
Yeah, it had its jokes well done, like right away. It was a funny pilot. I would give the points off because, again, as a comedy, you're not entirely sure what you're doing with these characters. So there's a couple things that you're watching. You're just like Amy. She has the bones of her character,
Mm-hmm.
and they build off of it, but it still is pretty different than who she turns out to be because they give her a lot more neuroses, and they give her a lot more brown nosing than she has in this episode.
Yeah.
They set off like this like a rivalry, antagonistic relationship between her and Peralta, although it's done in fun and it's done in jest. But and that's some character development, so I guess that's not as good of an example. The biggest aggressor is the
Charles
Doyle and Rosa,
I was just gonna
like
say that
love thing. Yeah, they're like, oh, this doesn't work. They realize that after the first season, or maybe even halfway through the first season, like this doesn't work as a dynamic. We need to get rid of it.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of moving pieces in this. They're like, it kind of betrays the characters later on in seasons, but it does. I did notice that with Brooklyn Nine-Nine because there are other comedies where it's like even the jokes aren't so much funny in the first season that they haven't found even their voice for humor yet, and this one at least had that. And I felt like the jokes are solid from the beginning.
Yeah. And he said the rivalry between Peralta and Amy, they set up right away that the stakes of the bet is that Amy will go on a date with Jake. And like you can right away, okay, I can see where this is going. They're going to be the couple. Like they don't even try to hide it, which I think is smart.
Yeah. Yep, agreed. And there are changes that happen, especially with Peralta and Holt. But that is what I would say character development, where like Holt, he's influenced by the 9-9, and he is able to relax a little bit more, and so he does become a little sillier as the seasons go on. But that's just being in that environment. Whereas Peralta gets more responsibility, which is again another sign of character growth and arc. You'd hope someone would get more responsibility the more, especially someone as childish as Peralta is at the very beginning of the show.
Yeah. Brooklyn Nine-Nine, I think, is definitely underrated. I think it's every bit as funny as The Office and Parks and Rec and Friends and these shows, but those shows definitely get much more acclaim and popularity, which is a shame that this one doesn't.
Yeah, I'd say at its height, it rivals those. I still will put either of those shows above Brooklyn Nine-Nine for sure.
I will too, but it's in my top 5.
Yeah. Wow. That is something. All right. Well, but yeah, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, great show, good pilot. Better pilot, no offense, but better pilot for sure. This is one that you easily could have. I know that you have one of them on here, but I think you could easily have this one too. The Breaking Bad pilot. We talked about Breaking Bad a couple weeks ago.
It's not, but that's a good pick.
Okay, perfect. So we don't have that crossover. So Breaking Bad, the first season is like 6 episodes, And the absolute best episode of that season, and this is such a rarity for any TV show, is the pilot.
Mhm.
The pilot just sets those stakes right away. And immediately it's like, because it starts off once again at the end of the episode when Walter's like, oh, what have I done? This is not a statement that he's doing the video recording. Is like, this is to my wife and family. This isn't a statement of guilt. And he's like apologizing for what he's done. Mm-hmm. And then like you hear sirens coming and he steps out into the road with his gun and is like, he's going to have this standout down in the Old West, and then it goes backwards and shows you how he got to that point. Mm-hmm. But it's a really it's a self-contained episode to give you a story that if it never got picked up after that, even that little glimpse is an interesting story to mm-hmm. see why he's jumping into this and why he's immediately doing what he does. And we get so much about Walt in that first episode. Jesse does change, but again, that's also character development. But it's like, Walt changes a lot too. But both of those characters, like right away, we get to see what we're going to be dealing with in this show. And then only after this happens, this inciting incident, does he keep getting deeper and deeper and deeper. But really, there is like this element of he has broken bad already in this first episode by doing just this one-time cook so far. And we get to see that in the pilot.
We get to see his wheels turning from the very beginning at his party when he sees all the money that Hank is, which, by the way, I'm pretty sure Hank's not just supposed to be showing them police footage like that at a birthday party.
That was on the news. It popped up.
Okay. Then never mind. I thought it was like video cam footage from the police. But anyway, when you can see Walt talking and looking through, like, how much money do they make? Is that normal? And then you can see like he's already thinking like because we know from later on he has this superiority complex. He thinks he's smarter than everybody else in the room, which he usually is, and so. That's why he asks, hey, can we go on this ride along? I want to see this. And then you can see his like curiosity when he's in the lab and he sees everything. And he without knowing anything about the meth business, he can see, okay, you're doing that and doing that, doing that. Like I could do this and I could do it better. And just the fact of like just glimpsing with no experience and being able to know exactly how to make meth and how to do it good and like to already make that decision. Who cares that this is crime? This is I'm all in.
Yeah, and he lucks out in seeing Jesse too, because it's like, how else would you get into this world without a contact? And suddenly, boom, his former student, who he may not be able to trust him completely, but he can trust him a lot more than any other of these criminals. Plus, it's a student of his, so it's someone he is used to talking down to. Let's be honest, that's what he needs as a partner because he's a condescending jerk. And he immediately gets that in and forms that connection. It is really good job, and it's like so much happens in this first episode that it then immediately like pulls it back. It's like, wait, let's take a little bit about Walter and some other things with him and like give him more of his backstory and build on that. And so there's like the rest of the season really is slow compared to this one until they get back to he meets Tuco and it picks back up.
Yeah, it definitely is an episode that sucks you in. A lot of times you have to tell people, just get through the first season and then it'll be good. Whereas with Breaking Bad is just watch it.
Yeah, absolutely. From the beginning.
Yeah. So my number 2 is another one that's also a comedy, but it's a comedy that I think it's a pick that is a great pilot, especially after you've watched the show and you know the twist ahead of time, and going back and getting to pick apart the little details and how clever that is.
Good Place.
Yes, The Good Place.
Got it.
Good call.
That's a good intro to the subject.
Yeah, because I mean, obviously spoilers for The Good Place, but it's been out long enough to know right from the beginning that Michael is toying with Eleanor and the rest of them, that they're actually in the bad place, and being able to see that from the very beginning. The first thing is everything is fine. That's what you want from the heavenly afterlife. It's fine.
And they even like the meme of the dog sitting in there and there's fire all around him. This is fine.
Yeah. And there's not even an exclamation mark. It's like Dwight with his birthday party. This is fine. And I picked up on so many little clues. Like at one point there's a fountain. I'm saying like a lot. I picked up on so many clues There's one of the big fountain outside Tahani's house. If you look closely, there are little frogs that are jumping in the fountain. Which, yeah, frogs are by fountains by water, but it's kind of like the reminiscent of like the plagues. And then at the end, once they have like the crazy sequence when everything's going wrong, one of the things you see is a giant frog like licking giant shrimp out of the air, and just everyone's reactions and some things that don't sit well when they're doing the presentation about how the good place works, and they show everybody and with all the numbers like, oh, you got a good number, you got a bad number. They don't even say if your number is in the green, you get to go to the good place. They say only the best of the best get to come here, and they show other people whose final score was positive fading away to the bad place. And that itself, I mean, putting aside what we believe as Christians just for comedy, that itself should have been more of a red flag to people. And it's just, you watch this and like, yeah, there are a ton of frozen yogurt places, and you realize, yeah, frozen yogurt's not bad, but how often are you like, dang, I really need to go get some frozen yogurt right now?
0%.
Yeah.
No, never, never.
Yeah. It's why the Cherry Berry and Wilmer shut down.
I like The Good Place. I don't know if that would hit my top. Well, it didn't hit my top 3. It didn't even hit my top 5. But no. Good Place, that is another solid pilot. That is also one because they have thought through so much of what they're doing with this show. Mm-hmm. I will give credit that their characters, they have them really close to what they're going to be. Again, mm-hmm. There's the room for them to grow through the seasons, and that's also part of the point. But they have a very solid base right off the bat. Of course, Eleanor, she's a lot more jerky in the first season, mm-hmm. but the whole point is that she becomes less jerky through these experiences. So it's not like it's inconsistent. It's just growth, like we said. So They do a really good job with having where they're going solidified. It is very well written and very smart, and the launch is really good. So
yeah, and it really showcases the comedic chops of Ted Danson, because he was on Cheers for 11 years, but for the most part, he was the straight man over there. Mm-hmm. I love the scene, like I said, when everything's going wrong, they're all in the yellow and black, and he's talking to Tahani, and even though now we know he's putting on a play, but she's saying like, is this all supposed to be happening? And I love his delivery of, it's a good question. No. He takes that pause, and then she's like, should we run away? And he's like, yes, that's such a great idea. And like, I don't know. He like I want to watch more stuff with Ted Danson in it, more comedies with Ted Danson in it.
Yes, I agree completely. This show made me like Ted Danson more. He was the shining star for me in this show. Not that any other of the main cast are bad, especially like all of them are really good. Like even Janet, and Janet is one of those unique characters where she's supposed to be playing like Data on Star Trek. She doesn't have emotion, and that's a big part of it. She's Siri, a live action Siri, but yet she delivers her lines so well with that characteristic, and so she is just fantastic in it. But yeah, my Ted Danson as Michael, I'm glad that he got the Emmy nominations that he did. I don't know if he won, I don't remember exactly, but he definitely deserved to be nominated for this series. He does such a good job.
And that's another one, like Breaking Bad. You don't have to say skip the pilot. No, watch the pilot. It's good.
Yeah. It gives you tools for later. Good Place is also one of those episodes too that does a really good job of every episode leading into the next one. Mm-hmm. So they storyboarded these seasons really well, and they didn't just, okay, our thing is wrapped up in 30 minutes, we're good. It's like, okay, yeah, the conflict of that episode was wrapped up in 30 minutes, but here's a prelude for what next episode is going to be about. Mm-hmm. So, yep, good pick.
So, Matt, we discovered before here that we have the same number 1.
Of course, and it's hard not to, because this show changed the game for TV shows, and the pilot was like a TV event. I remember ABC aired it like a couple different times because they're like, no, you guys really want to watch this show, check out this pilot. We're gonna show it a couple different times and get you guys back into this show. And so I caught it actually on the second or third time they aired it, and not its first, and I was like, oh yeah, I need to watch this show.
This is a show that for me, I've always said the season 3 finale, Through the Looking Glass, is my favorite episode. I think the top 4 easily: Through the Looking Glass, the pilot, the Exodus, which is the season 1 finale, and The Constant. I think those 4 are, without a doubt, their strongest 4 episodes.
Yeah, and that show is Lost. You've probably caught it. For anyone who's a Lost fan, you would have caught it by those episode titles. But
Yes.
yeah, Lost was that show. It was an event, and it came at the right time for where we were as a society for
Hmm.
technology, because I remember all these forums. It was like using the internet to help decipher what in the world is going on in this show. And especially in that first season, I have never seen people be so intrigued by the mysteries of a show like I did for Lost.
Hmm.
And all these different forums, and people like had the purgatory idea right away. And I actually feel like maybe that the writers did have that in mind when they first started the show, because they've gone back and they said no, that was not the intended thing. And then they used purgatory later in this in the
Hmm.
show in the sixth season. They weren't in purgatory the whole time. This was not purgatory. They just used it for the Flash Sideways.
Yeah.
We always need to remind people that. But I do think that that might have been what they were going for when they
Could have been.
first had this. And then when everyone guessed it in season one, they're like, we have to pivot. This is we can't do that. We got to do something different. And
Yeah.
so
And the like a plane crashing on an island, that would have been interesting enough. But then
mhm.
you add in the two-part pilot, you have the monster. No, even though you hear the monster, you get the polar bear, you get all the personal relations with the cast. And
Yeah.
I'm not sure if there's any other big mysteries that started at the pilot besides those, besides the polar bear and the monster. We didn't know anything about the others until a little bit later in the season.
Yeah. They make a reference about like the torrential rainfall and like how that's abnormal too.
Mm,
But that's not so much of a captivating thing as like a polar bear in a jungle
yeah.
or something destroying trees. There's also a little bit of like this fatalistic, like because the pilot, when using its flashback narrative, it was going back to the airport and showing all these people as they're getting on the plane. And so
Mm,
that was the way to introduce them as well. And there's a little bit of this theming, especially in that first season of like being fated and everything being special. Like, how did we survive this plane crash? And those who did survive with no scratches, and how did we like interact with each other in the airport before we even got on the plane, and like how
mm,
we were all on this plane together, and like that sort of thing that made the world feel smaller because you had all these international people converging together over one flight.
yeah. You had people from, I mean, like see, Saeed's from Iraq. You got the Kwans from Korea. Claire's from Australia. A lot of them are from America. Charlie's from England. I mean, they literally are from everywhere, and they ended up all in Sydney on that day
Yep.
for various reasons to fly on that plane. And just in real life, all of the work they put into it. That's an actual airplane that they broke apart and put there on the beach, and just the amount of like I mean I can only imagine what that would be like in person. You're filming and you expect a little, maybe this is going to be CGI behind us. No, there's an actual freaking plane behind you.
Yeah. Yeah, and then after that plane too, they had the one of the composers, Michael Giacchino, not one of the composer for the
Yeah.
show. He took wreckage from the plane and
Hmm.
utilized that
Yep, I was going
in
to
the
bring that up.
songs that
Yeah.
he wrote, and that's like a really like kinetic way to
Mhm.
include set. Like what a weird thing to do, but it worked.
On the
It worked.
season one DVD, there's a documentary about making this episode, and that's one of the things they talked about is they had the strings, they had their general uh, orchestra, but then those little pieces, and as far as Michael Giacchino's score, made it seem so unique. Like that's just the score sounds like Lost, which
Yep.
is where like when you use the Lost soundtrack in our movie Jeremy that we made for Youth Group, it's like this is the Lost soundtrack. Like I didn't even have to look it up. I'm like, yeah, you
Yep.
used.
Yeah, exactly. Lost was so specific in its sound, and like that's why Michael Giacchino, like this was one of his first big breaks,
Mhm.
and like if you look at movies and who are composing in movies, he is used in so many movies. He has score in so many films nowadays. He's
Mhm.
like the new John Williams,
He did
and
he did the score for Up.
yep. He's done a lot of like Disney Pixar. He's done a lot of stuff with like Brad Bird and like the Mission Impossible
Mhm.
movies. He's like there's a lot that you can point to and be like, yep, that was Michael Giacchino.
Mhm. It's cool to see. Also, just with the visuals of Lost Pilot, they talked about how they combined some of the different practical with special effects, like the polar bear. originally the polar bear, when it like lunged at Sawyer and them, it was just an actual like big puppet that they made, and they like, threw this thing at it. When you freeze framed it, and people did that, they did the promos before they changed it, and you freeze frame it, and it just looks like this awkward, weird. You could tell it's just like a big stuffed animal being thrown at it. It's not menacing at all, and people were already making fun of it. Like, okay, we need to change that. So even just a couple frames, they matted over like an actual polar bear's face to make it look. So if you freeze frame it when it was done, it looks more like an actual polar bear coming after them.
Yeah, I bet they were surprised by like, wait, people are freeze framing our show, so we need to make sure every frame looks good.
This was 2004. This is when that was just starting to become a thing.
Yeah, yeah. Now is like, of course, people are gonna be freeze framing your shows, so you need to make sure every frame is great. But like that wasn't the case before that. It really changed the game, guys. If you were not alive or like were not TV aficionados before 2004, it's hard to understand just how impactful Lost was. Mm-hmm. There are certain shows that really just changed the game, and Lost is absolutely one of those shows.
Mm-hmm. I recommend, if you have HBO Max, watch the documentary series called The Early 2000s. It's not just about movies and TV shows and politics and like everything from that era. It's really interesting. And you know, one thing they did I'll keep going back and forth with Lost, to also just to show the visual and like to kind of just portray how big this island is supposed to be. There's a scene in part 2 where it's like Sawyer and Kate and Charlie and a bunch of them. They're trekking to the highest part of the mountain to get the signal, and we see them climbing up like way high up on a mountain. They showed how they did that. They filmed that just like right like on the ground. It's like a tiny little hill, like just off the ground. Like they're not hiking anything. And they had filmed them just climbing that little hill, and then they superimposed that on top of this mountain. And they even they pan the camera like, yeah, so they're over here on the ground, and we're going to make it look like they pan the camera over. We're going to make it look like they're way on the top of that mountain. And it's just little stuff. I mean, obviously, when you're watching the show, you don't actually think, yeah, they put these guys in danger. But you're thinking maybe they're higher up than you thought. Maybe they got harnesses and stuff. It's like, no, they're just right off the ground. And, you know, it's just, even like when the plane was breaking apart, they showed that the front of the plane where you see Kate and the Marshal, that's a set with a green screen behind them, and they CGI'd the back half of the plane in, and they have stunt guys on wires that like when the one guy goes flying out of the plane, he actually is being like on hooked up to cables, being shoved in the back, and then that with like the sky in the back of the plane CGI behind it just gives it that extra crazy feel.
Yeah, that'd be fun to be that guy. Just stand there getting yanked.
Yeah, I'm sure there's no stunt training at all. They just grab, say, "Hey, do you want to get shoved in the airplane?" All right.
I mean that's it. Like, okay, so the director of The Exorcist like treated the people on the set like crap, and like the one of the people that he gets that's like shoved backwards, like they had it where she was pulled like that, and he had her get like pulled back like that early, because there is like one of those, I'm going to count to 3, but it's going to pull on 2 to get like the actual fear reaction, and she hurt her back really, really bad from doing that. So if you're going to be doing that, do it right.
Yeah, there's also, I think, a line between getting an authentic reaction and also just treating your cast like garbage. I think there's a middle ground there.
Yeah, like the Hans Gruber in Die Hard, when Alan Rickman gets quote unquote dropped off the building. That was another situation where they dropped him on 2 instead of 3, but there wasn't the chance for injury for him. So his like surprise reaction was actually legitimate, but he didn't get hurt from it.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, and with all of this stuff, the music, the casting, and all the superimposing and the stunts, it just goes to show how much money and time and effort was put into this pilot. It didn't just happen. There's a whole like team of people. Like, I mean, I don't even know. You couldn't. I mean, it would probably take forever to list everyone who had a hand in that being made.
I thought I recalled hearing that this was the most expensive pilot at the time when it came out.
I'm not sure what would have beat it since then.
Yeah, in the history of TV. I mean, now it's like because of streaming services and like they do all of their season at once or whatever that is like the same cost for, I don't know exactly how they would, like, because like Lord of the Rings, that is a very expensive TV show. I'm sure the pilot costs so much more, as well as every other episode. But
but it just goes to show you, like, you got to respect the care that went into that pilot, and
absolutely,
and not just about. And we've said on the show, we are both Lost apologists on this show, unashamedly Lost apologists.
No apologies for me here, nor no regrets. No. Loved Lost. I even stand by how it ended. Wasn't at the top that I wanted it to be, but it did give good closure for characters, not as much for some of the questions we had.
Yeah. Oh, well. So Matt, you said you had a really close number 4. Well, what almost made your list?
So what almost made the list was Firefly. Now, Firefly had this problem where Fox didn't quite know how to market it, didn't know what to do with it. They actually aired episodes out of order. So the first episode that Fox aired was episode 2, called The Train Job. And that's a fine episode in of itself. But the pilot for Firefly was shot very specifically to be the pilot. It was 2 hours versus the one, similar to Lost. It was like a TV movie. And so this is another one that was self-contained in its own story, that sure, there was more to do after that. But if you only watched the pilot, you easily could have a full experience and be like, all right, that's all I needed, and that's okay. And so, in fact, in that episode, they take on some people, like the crew of the Firefly is introduced really well, and then they land at this one station, and they're like, well, we need to take some more people on because we are not making it. We need more money. And so, like, they allow themselves to get a couple passengers, which includes Ron Glass, who played Shepherd Book, and then it includes the Simon, and unbeknownst to them, he also brought on River, but we don't see River on there yet. And so there was a couple of series regulars that come onto the ship, and then there was a few other people that they brought onto the ship as well. Now, we didn't know at the time that Simon was going to be a series regular. And so he's on the ship, and then some things start to go wrong, and they're like, wait a second, one of these people on the ship is not who they say they are. And Simon, this rich doctor, has this big case, and they're like, there's something in here. There's a problem with this. And they end up having to open it, and inside is this naked woman. And they're like, oh my gosh, is this guy trafficking this woman? And like everything goes off against a fan, and they're like freaking out at him, and they're gonna kill him, and etc. But it's like, no, wait, this is actually my sister. And there's like that twist that goes on, and they're like, well, wait, if you're trying to save your sister from the governmental overwatch that is controlling everything, then who has been sabotaging our ship? And then all of a sudden we know that it's this other character and so it was like this nice twist in the middle of the story that you don't get that twist because of how they played things out of order. So the whole thing, if you haven't seen it, guess what? I gave it away, but at the same time, you probably are going to know who are the series regulars anyway. But it was a good story for those 2 hours. It introduced us to these characters, introduced us to the dynamics, and introduced us to the stakes, because the show, a lot of it was about what's going on with River and keeping her and her brother Simon safe from the Alliance. And so it was a really good premiere. I am still upset that Fox did them dirty. I don't agree with all the people who are like, oh, reboot the show, especially now Ron Glass is dead, and it just wouldn't be the same as it was, unfortunately. So Firefly was my number 4. I also wanted to throw out, because I know that you haven't seen it, I wanted to throw out to another great pilot that also had a twist, and I liked the twist of it, and that set the precedent for what the show was going to be like, and that was This Is Us. And This Is Us, the twist of that is you find out that there are multiple storylines happening, but one is happening back in like the 70s and one is happening more present day. And the storyline that's happening in the 70s is the father and mother of the other 3 storylines of these main characters that we're following, these 2 brothers and 1 sister.
Yeah. The first episode I ever saw was episode 2. I didn't see episode 1 until a little bit later. So I only ever saw episode 1 knowing what was going on. And it's hard for me to imagine not seeing it clearly as you go. But then it's like, again, it's you can't put the genie back in the bottle and pretend you don't know.
Yeah, it's one of those, like, when you guess the twist of something, is like, oh, that character is actually in this person's head, and then you look like, is that character interacting with anyone else except for the main character? Nope, they're not. Okay, that's probably going to be the case. It's going to be in their head. So
Mhm.
sometimes it does use a disservice, and you're like, I wonder if that's what they're gonna do, and then it's like they do that, and you're like, well, I guessed it. There's something that about, and I won't ruin this because this is in case you haven't seen it, but the movie Arrival. It's a pretty
Mhm.
good movie, but it has a nice little thing that happens in the middle of it that I'm like, I think that that's what they're doing with this movie, and then you get to that point like, well, I really would have liked to experience this reveal with everyone else, but I guess not. Here we are.
On the other end, I know I think I've mentioned this before. I'm still bitter about 24 season 6 because I had that where like I totally clocked a twist coming. I think this guy, they're setting it up. This guy's going to be the mole. They're dropping the hints. He's going to be the mole working for the bad guys. And then he gets shot and killed, and he wasn't a mole. But then I found out that they were going to make a storyline where he was the mole, and that what I was right. But then the actor wanted to leave the show, so then they just changed it and killed him off. So then it's like, but I was right, and now I don't get to be right.
Way to go, stupid actor. Oh, I want to leave the show. Well, there you are. There are some of our best pilots. There wasn't anything that you had for an honorable mention, Brian?
No, no, I didn't.
No, he didn't. So let us know there. What are other pilots that we missed? There are a lot of good ones out there. West Wing was a great one. I've talked about character introductions, and West Wing is a wonderful example of how to introduce a character because the way that they introduce the president, you're sure he's a series regular, but he's like nowhere to be found in the first episode. And then when you finally see him in the last scene, he brings this weight and this presence that is like, that is how you introduce someone. So that's another great episode. A lot of people have said Mad Men. I don't know. It's fine. But there's
So, Matt,
plenty good pilots.
talking about character introductions, and I don't remember. Do you remember when you and I met for the first time? It was like
No.
around 2000, like 7, 8, something around that time.
No. I remember, like, I know where it would have had to have been.
It would
That it
have
would
been
have
at Bethel,
been,
a youth group.
yeah. Because no, actually, it would have probably been on the Sunday because when Paul came to the school and was like, hey, we're a great church, and then like, oh, we need a drummer, and like, hey, I play drums. I think I was even on for maybe I would have been at youth group and I wasn't there for the Sunday. I don't remember if it was Sunday or Wednesday, but I know that as soon as I was like, hey, I play drums, that I immediately was booked for the worship team. He's like, all right, you're in. Because I was also with Dan. And so Dan, in a way, vouched for me, even though he didn't really know me that well. And he was like, hey, he plays drums.
So you can blame Dan for that. I'm sure he'd be, I'm sorry.
Either Dan or Paul. One of them is the reason that we're friends and the reason for TV guys. So
Yeah. The thing I do remember is like you coming back from Christmas break once, and I was like, "Oh, by the way, I have a girlfriend now. This is Angie."
and I love her. That's true. That did happen.
Mm-hmm.
And then shortly after that day, once we got back, and I was like, "This is my girlfriend." Like a couple days later, Angie and I were looking at our calendar, and we're like, "I think we're gonna get married on May 22nd of 2010." That was how quick we had our wedding date picked out. So,
well,
yeah, when you know, you know.
I suppose.
For any teenagers listening out there, that probably doesn't apply to you.
Anyways, we should go to trivia. So last week we talked about The Office seasons 4 and 5, and we asked what was significant about the hospital at the end of season 5 when Jim and Pam found out they were having a baby. The answer is it was filmed in the hospital where they filmed Scrubs. So if you look closely, hey, that's Sacred Heart. Yes, it is.
Welcome to Sacred Heart.
It's not how it goes.
Yeah, no, that's close enough.
Welcome to Sacred Heart.
No, that's wrong. That's completely wrong. Mine was better, although it probably wasn't. No, I can think of a song. But hey, good job with the trivia. You had that ready to go right away. Didn't
Yes.
pause at all. Hey, so what is the trivia for this week? What do we got?
All right, so the one we had for our number one, Lost. Who was the cast member who they had to wait in order to get their legal papers to be able to actually film on the show because this was an international cast member?
Matthew Fox.
Do you know the answer to this one?
Nope, but there's like just a few there's a few like if you did this multiple choice, there's only like 4 people you could put as the multiple choices.
So who had to wait to see if they were legally able to film in America?
There you go.
Next week, our 100th episode. Also, we're cheating. It's not really about TV. We're going to take you back 20 years and talk about early 2000s internet. because
That's
I
right.
wanted to, and Matt said yes.
And I said yes. I agreed to it. To the early 2000s, it was a wild west of content on the internet. Let me tell you that much. Oh
It
man,
was.
those are the late years of my high school years and early years of my college years, and just like you get home after school and some of the stuff that you watch or you listen to and you go on after you're like, well, what should I do while Kazaa is downloading my 1,000 songs that I want to get for
Yep.
free?
And
Oh,
then
I'll load this up.
and after Kazaa it was LimeWire.
After Kazaa, yeah. Well, it's Napster first, then Kazaa, then LimeWire.
Yeah, we were a little bit too young for the Napster.
Yeah, a little too young for the Napster. So early 2000s internet. We're gonna explore that can of disgusting worms. So make sure you're here for that, and then we'll have another Office episode the week after that, and that's gonna do it for the month. That'll get us through the rest of October. So then it'll be Halloween, and we'll be all scared of stuff. So
Ah,
man, we're almost done. We are most of the way done with the year. We're almost at elections, and then we're almost at Thanksgiving, and then we'll be almost at Christmas. It's nuts, guys.
it
Put your
is.
Christmas decorations out already right now. Do it. Go get them. Go find them. All right. Well, until next time, I'm Matt,
I'm Brian.
and we're reminding you to stay tuned and keep watching.